I never intended to bring down an entire family. That wasn't my goal when I accepted the position as nanny for the Harrington children in their Connecticut estate. My name is Emma Collins, 26, working through graduate school in child psychology. The Harringtons embodied American wealth. Richard, a hedge fund manager with calculating blue eyes, and Victoria, his trophy wife 15 years younger, who preferred charity galas to family time. Their children, Sophie, 8, and Ethan, 6, were starved for attention, but otherwise sweet kids who quickly stole my heart. The children's schedule is non-negotiable, Victoria told me during my interview, sliding a color-coded timetable across the Marble Island. Piano on Mondays, tennis on Tuesdays, French lessons on Wednesdays. Every moment was structured to mold them into perfect little heirs. What was missing was time to simply be children. I kept a diary, something I'd done since my teens, documenting my thoughts and observations about the family dynamics. It was part of my studies, analyzing family systems in real time. I never intended for anyone to read it. Miss Emma, why doesn't Daddy ever come to my recitals? Sophie asked one evening as I tucked her in, her voice breaking with hurt no child should feel. Your daddy works hard to give you all these nice things, I replied, the answer I'd been instructed to give. I'd rather have him than the things, she whispered, clutching her teddy bear. I wrote about this in my diary, along with dozens of similar moments. Ethan's tears when both parents missed his school play, Victoria checking her phone throughout dinner instead of engaging with her children, and Richard's temper when the kids were too noisy during his calls. But I also wrote about something else. Something I witnessed 3 months into my employment that I should have reported. I had gone to Richard's home office late one night to retrieve Sophie's homework. The door was ajar, and inside, Richard was in a heated argument on his phone. I don't care what it takes. Move the funds offshore before the audit. I'm not losing everything because some government pencil pusher decides to do their job. I froze, realizing I was overhearing something I shouldn't. Then came the words that chilled me. If Miller doesn't back off, find something on him. Everyone has dirt. His kid's in college, right? Maybe there's something there we can use. I backed away silently. Richard Harrington was threatening someone's family to cover up what sounded like financial crimes. I wrote everything down that night, debating what to do. Report him? To whom? I had no evidence, and he was powerful. I decided to wait and gather more information. Weeks passed, and Richard grew increasingly agitated, drinking more, coming home at odd hours, having hushed conversations. Victoria seemed oblivious, continuing her social circuit as if nothing was wrong. Then came the day that changed everything. Victoria asked me to grab her phone charger from her bedroom while she was playing with the children, a rare occurrence I didn't want to interrupt. In her nightstand, I found not just the charger, but photos showing Richard with a younger woman in intimate situations at what looked like a beach house. I quickly replaced everything, but my mind was racing. That night, I wrote about the discovery, connecting it to the household tension and Richard's suspicious behavior. Was his financial misconduct tied to this affair? Was he planning to leave Victoria, possibly hiding assets before a divorce? The next morning, Victoria approached me as I made breakfast. Emma, can I speak with you privately? Her voice was tight. In the study, she closed the door and turned to me with red-rimmed eyes. I need to ask you something, and I need honesty. Have you noticed anything unusual about Richard lately? I hesitated, torn between loyalty and concern. I've noticed he seems stressed, I offered cautiously. Victoria laughed bitterly. Stressed, that's one word for it. She took a deep breath. Emma, I know this is inappropriate, but I feel like I'm losing my mind. You see things I might miss. I'm asking if you think Richard is being faithful. The direct question stunned me. I'm not comfortable speculating about your marriage. Please, she whispered. I have nowhere else to turn. Looking at her vulnerable expression, I made a decision that would set everything in motion. I keep a journal, I said slowly. It's part of my studies, observing family dynamics. I've written down things I've noticed. If you think it might help, I could make you a copy of certain entries. Victoria's eyes widened. Would you? I would never ask, but I'm desperate. That evening, I selected specific pages. Observations about Richard's late nights, suspicious calls, and distant behavior. I included my accidental discovery of the photographs, framing it as having noticed them partially visible when helping Sophie find a hairband. I deliberately left out what I'd overheard about the financial misconduct. That was a different danger, and I wasn't sure how Victoria would handle it. I made copies at a nearby library and slipped them to Victoria before Richard woke up. Thank you, she murmured, clutching the envelope. No matter what's in here, I appreciate your honesty. I nodded, already wondering if I'd made a terrible mistake. 2 days passed in tense silence. Victoria was absent most of the time, and when home, she moved like a ghost through the house. Richard seemed oblivious, continuing his pattern of late nights and secretive calls. Then came the morning that shattered everything. I was helping the children get ready for school when shouting erupted from the master bedroom. Glass shattered. Sophie and Ethan froze, fear in their eyes. It's okay, I assured them. Let's go outside and wait for the bus early today. As I ushered them toward the door, Victoria emerged, her face a mask of cold fury. Behind her, Richard followed, his expression a mix of rage and panic. You had no right, he shouted. Going through my things, hiring someone to follow me? Victoria turned, her voice deadly calm. I had every right. This is my life too, Richard. Or at least, it was. She spotted us and immediately composed herself. Emma, please take the children to school yourself today. Use my car. I nodded, relieved to remove the children from the situation. As we left, I heard Richard hiss. This isn't just about the affair, Victoria. You have no idea what you've done. I drove the children to school in silence, answering their worried questions as best I could. Are Mommy and Daddy getting a divorce? Sophie asked, her voice small. I don't know, sweetheart, I answered honestly. But no matter what happens, they both love you. I wasn't entirely sure that was true, but it seemed right to say. When I returned, the house was quiet. Both Victoria's and Richard's cars were gone. I used the time to wonder if I'd been right to give Victoria those diary entries. Had I interfered too much? Around noon, Victoria called. Emma, pack overnight bags for the children and bring them to the Four Seasons. We'll be staying there for a while. Is everything okay? I asked, knowing the answer. No, she replied flatly, but it will be. I've initiated divorce proceedings. I've also contacted the authorities about some irregularities I found when I started looking into Richard's affairs more closely. My stomach dropped. The authorities? The FBI, specifically. It seems my husband has been involved in financial fraud and threatening people to keep it quiet. I swallowed hard. Had my diary entries led her to investigate further? I'll bring the children right away, I promised. As I packed, my phone pinged with a news alert. Prominent hedge fund manager Richard Harrington under investigation for fraud and witness intimidation. It was happening so fast. At the hotel, Victoria greeted us in a luxurious suite, looking simultaneously exhausted and energized. Emma, would you mind staying? I'd like to keep things normal for the children, and they adore you. I agreed, setting up a makeshift classroom while Victoria met with lawyers. The children were confused, but treated our hotel stay like an adventure. That evening, after they were asleep, Victoria opened a bottle of wine and invited me to join her. I owe you an explanation, she said, and an apology for dragging you into this. You don't owe me anything, I insisted. I'm just worried about the children. That's why I trust you. She sipped her wine. After reading your observations, I hired a private investigator. He uncovered not just the affair, but evidence of Richard's crimes. When I confronted him, he threatened me, said if I pursued divorce, he'd make sure I got nothing and would fight for custody. I gasped. He wouldn't. He would. But he underestimated me. Victoria's eyes hardened. I've spent years playing the perfect, oblivious wife. He forgot that I worked in corporate law before becoming a mother. I know how to gather evidence. The Victoria before me was nothing like the detached woman I thought I knew. Your diary entries gave me the confirmation I needed, but they also showed me how absent I've been from my children's lives. Tears filled her eyes. When I read what Sophie said about preferring her father to material things, I realized I've been just as negligent as Richard. It's not too late, I said gently. They adore you. I know, and I'm going to do better. She squared her shoulders. Richard is going to fight dirty, but I've turned over evidence to the FBI. The threats he made against Miller, that was a federal prosecutor. He's facing serious charges. I felt a chill. I heard that threat but didn't include it in what I gave you. The investigator found evidence elsewhere, but your diary entries pushed me to look deeper. You were the only one who saw what was happening in our home. 3 days later, Richard was arrested. The news exploded across financial and society pages. The children watched their father being led away in handcuffs before I could change the channel. That night, I submitted my resignation. I think it's best if I step back, I explained. The children need their mother now, not a nanny who's become entangled in your family drama. Please don't go, Victoria said with unexpected emotion. The children need stability, and so do I. I've been thinking, I want to create a foundation supporting children from broken homes. With your background in child psychology, you'd be perfect as our program director. I was stunned. That's incredibly generous. It's practical, she corrected me. I'm going to use half of Richard's assets, which the court will almost certainly award me, to fund it. This way, some good can come from this mess. 6 months later, the Harrington Family Foundation launched its first program. Richard pled guilty to multiple financial crimes and witness intimidation, receiving a 12-year sentence. The divorce was finalized, with Victoria receiving primary custody and a substantial settlement. The beach house where Richard conducted his affair was sold, and Victoria purchased a smaller, cozier home where the children had friends over regularly. She cut back on charity events to attend school functions and help with homework. Sophie and Ethan still had scars from their family's collapse, but they were healing. In therapy sessions, which Victoria insisted the whole family attend, Sophie finally asked the question that had been haunting me. Miss Emma, did your diary make Daddy go to jail? Victoria and I exchanged glances, and I chose my words carefully. No, sweetheart. Your daddy made choices that were wrong. My diary just helped your mom see what was happening. One evening, as Victoria and I reviewed proposals for the foundation, she said something that stayed with me. You know, most people would have looked away, pretended not to see what was happening in our family. Or worse, they would have used it for gossip or leverage. But you documented it out of genuine concern. I still sometimes feel guilty, I admitted. Like I caused your family to fall apart. Victoria shook her head. We were already falling apart, Emma. We just looked perfect from the outside. What you did was give me a chance to build something better from the ruins, for myself and my children. As I watched her with Sophie and Ethan that night, truly present with them for perhaps the first time, I realized my diary hadn't destroyed a family after all. It had revealed the cracks in a facade and given 3 people the chance for something authentic instead. Sometimes, secrets need to be exposed not for vengeance, but for healing. My diary had done exactly that. A year passed since Richard's arrest. The media frenzy eventually died down, but the aftermath continued to shape our lives. I had accepted Victoria's offer to work for her foundation, balancing my graduate studies with helping families in situations similar to what the Harrington children had experienced. Victoria had transformed. Gone was the socialite who outsourced parenting. In her place stood a devoted mother who rarely missed a school event. She'd traded designer gowns for business casual as she took control of her portion of Richard's former assets and built the foundation. "Emma, we received funding approval for the summer camp program," Victoria announced one morning as we worked in her home office. "We can accommodate 50 children from families affected by incarceration." I smiled, genuinely proud of what we'd accomplished. "That's amazing. The therapy sessions integrated with outdoor activities should really help them process their emotions." Victoria nodded, but I noticed the tension in her shoulders. "There's something else. Richard's appealing his conviction. His new lawyers are claiming prosecutorial misconduct." My stomach tightened. "Does he have a case?" "Unlikely," she sighed. "But it means the children might have to deal with this all over again." The media, the questions from classmates, the intercom buzzed. Sophie needed help with a school project. Victoria immediately set aside her papers and went to assist her daughter, a small but significant change from the woman who once would have delegated the task to me. Later that week, I received an unexpected letter at my apartment. The return address was from the Federal Correctional Institution where Richard was being held. My hands trembled as I opened it. "Ms. Collins, I know you're still working with my family. Victoria may have told you I'm appealing my conviction. What she doesn't know is why. I've had a lot of time to think in here, about the kind of father and husband I was, about the example I set for my children. The truth is, I failed them long before you arrived. I don't blame you for sharing your observations with Victoria. You saw what was happening and acted to protect my children, which is more than I did. There's something in my personal files that Victoria needs to see, something that could help her secure the foundation's future. The combination to my home safe is Sophie's birthday backward. Tell Victoria to look for the blue folder. Richard Harrington." I stared at the letter, unsure if it was genuine or some manipulation. I decided to show it to Victoria during our next meeting. "He's playing games," she said immediately after reading it. "This is classic Richard, creating mystery to draw you in. What if it's legitimate? What if there's something important in that safe?" Victoria hesitated, then sighed. "Fine. We'll check it out tomorrow when the children are at school." The following day, we stood in Richard's former home office, now converted to Victoria's workspace. The painting concealing the wall safe had been replaced with the children's framed artwork, but the safe remained. Victoria entered the combination with steady hands. Inside, among various documents, sat a blue folder. She removed it cautiously, as if it might bite. "Investment portfolios," she murmured, flipping through the pages. "Offshore accounts the FBI didn't find? Why would he—" She stopped suddenly, her expression shifting. "Oh my God. What is it?" She handed me a document. "It's a trust fund he set up for the children 6 months before his arrest. Completely legal, separate from his fraudulent activities. The FBI couldn't touch it during asset seizure." I skimmed the document. Over $15 million set aside for Sophie and Ethan's future, with specific instructions that it be used for education and their well-being. "There's a letter," Victoria said, pulling out a sealed envelope with her name on it. She opened it and read silently, tears forming in her eyes. "He knew he was going to get caught," she finally said. "He set this up to protect the children. And—" She hesitated. "He specifically mentions that half of the trust can be directed to the Foundation's education programs once the children are provided for." I was stunned. So his appeal isn't about getting out. It's about renegotiating his plea deal to acknowledge this legitimate trust. She shook her head. "He's still manipulative, but this is unexpected." On our drive back to Victoria's new home, she was quiet, processing this revelation about the man she'd been married to for over a decade. "I don't know how to feel," she finally said. "He committed serious crimes. He threatened people. He betrayed our marriage. But he also made sure the children would be taken care of, and now he's supporting the foundation." "People are complicated," I offered. "Maybe prison gave him time to reflect." "Maybe." She didn't sound convinced. Or maybe this is his way of maintaining some control, even from behind bars. The next day, Victoria received a call from Richard's attorney requesting a meeting to discuss the trust and his appeal. She asked me to accompany her, needing someone who understood the full story. As we walked into the law office, I reflected on how drastically life had changed since I'd handed Victoria those diary pages. A family had indeed fallen apart, but something new and perhaps more authentic had emerged from the rubble. The meeting with Richard's attorney was tense, but productive. Victoria agreed to submit a statement to the court acknowledging the legitimate trust fund, which could potentially reduce Richard's sentence by a few years. In return, Richard would relinquish all claims to the Harrington name for business purposes, giving Victoria full control of the foundation's branding. "He's willing to sign these papers today," the lawyer said, sliding documents across the table. "He wanted me to tell you he's not fighting anymore." Victoria studied the papers carefully before signing. "Tell him I appreciate what he did for the children. It doesn't erase the past, but it matters." As we left the office, Victoria seemed lighter somehow. "Closure," she said simply. "Not forgiveness, but closure." The foundation flourished over the next 2 years. We expanded from summer camps to year-round programming, eventually helping hundreds of children from families affected by incarceration or divorce. The diary that had once exposed secrets now informed how we structured support groups for kids struggling with family upheaval. Sophie and Ethan visited their father monthly. These visits were difficult at first, but gradually became more comfortable. Richard, by all accounts, had become a model prisoner, teaching financial literacy classes to other inmates and participating in restorative justice programs. On a crisp fall afternoon, Victoria and I sat on her back porch watching Sophie and Ethan play soccer with neighborhood friends. The children were laughing, something that had once been rare in the Harrington household. "I've been meaning to ask you something," Victoria said, turning to me. "That diary of yours, do you still keep it?" I nodded. "Old habits. Though these days it's less about observing family dynamics and more about program development ideas." She smiled. "You know, I never read all of it, just the parts you selected. But those pages changed everything." "Do you ever regret it?" I asked quietly. "Learning the truth?" Victoria watched her children for a long moment. "Never. Living in a beautiful lie was destroying all of us, even if we couldn't see it. The children were growing up in an emotional wasteland. I was turning into someone I didn't recognize. And Richard?" She shook her head. "He might never have stopped if he hadn't been caught." Ethan scored a goal and looked over to make sure we were watching. Victoria cheered and gave him a thumbs up, her face radiant with genuine pride. "My relationship with them now is real," she continued. "Not perfect, but real. That's worth everything we went through." A week later, I received another letter from Richard. This one was brief. "Ms. Collins, I've been following the Foundation's work through Victoria. What you've built together is remarkable. You were right to document what you saw in our home. Truth, however painful, was necessary. I have one request. The children speak highly of you. When they're older, would you share with them that their father eventually understood the importance of honesty and integrity? Not to excuse what I did, but so they know people can change. Richard." I showed the letter to Victoria, who read it thoughtfully. "Will you?" she asked. "Tell them someday?" "If you think it's appropriate," I replied. She nodded. "When they're ready, they should know that mistakes, even terrible ones, don't have to define a person forever." That Christmas, the Harrington Family Foundation hosted a celebration for the families we'd worked with throughout the year. Sophie and Ethan helped serve food and distribute gifts, their confidence and compassion evident in every interaction. Victoria gave a brief speech thanking the staff and donors. To my surprise, she called me forward. "Most of you know Emma as our program director," she said, "but few know that without her, none of this would exist. Sometimes it takes an outsider's perspective to help us see the truth about our own lives." Later, as the party wound down, Victoria handed me a small wrapped package. Inside was a beautiful leather-bound journal with my initials embossed on the cover. "For your next chapter," she said with a smile. I thought about the journey that had brought us here, how a simple diary had exposed secrets that needed to come to light, how a family that appeared perfect had been quietly fracturing from within, and how sometimes destruction is necessary for rebuilding. Sophie appeared at my side, slipping her hand into mine. "Mom says your writing changed our lives," she said. "Is that true?" I squeezed her hand gently. "I think we all changed each other's lives, sweetheart." As I watched Sophie rejoin her brother and mother, I realized that the most important story wasn't what I had documented in my diary. It was what happened after the secrets were revealed, how Victoria had found her strength, how the children had found their mother, and how even Richard had found a measure of redemption. Some families don't need to be saved. They need to fall apart, so they can rebuild into something honest, something real. And sometimes it takes a diary filled with uncomfortable truths to make that happen.